Thank you.
Hi there. Carl Adams with the Utah Division of Water Quality, manage the watershed protection section, and
Kate Johnson, I'm also with DEQ in the Division of Drinking Water.
Thank you.
so I've been able to review American Fork's letter, and I think there's some really great points and some comments I have, but I don't know if that's proper time to go into those. But suffice it to say, I'm happy to provide comments both on the sampling analysis plan developed by Snowbird, as well as the comments provided by American Fork City on their recommendations. But if there are any specific questions, I would just start out by saying, in the course of the conversation tonight, that the American Fork River and tributaries from the mouth of the canyon to its headwaters are currently classified as, it's called anti-degradation category 1, meaning no discharges are allowed in that water body, and that water quality has to be maintained at the current level. Even though the current water quality is well below the water quality standards, being in this anti-degradation category 1 has to be maintained at that level. There's no increase allowed per state regulations.
Before you go on, because I'll forget my question. So anti-degradation, that would mean, so the Utah Division of Water Quality has jurisdiction over this area.
Yes, water quality.
And if the water gets worse, what recourse does the state of Utah have?
We have to find out why, and we would find out the source of the degradation.
We found out that what do you call these things that hold the ski lifts?
The towers.
Ski towers? Okay, sorry. We found out that the ski towers created contamination. What happens then?
The contamination would have to be remediated to meet the pre-existing.
Is it possible to remediate the contamination?
It's happened elsewhere, yes.
Probably.
Yes.
Okay, sorry, so cool.
Nope.
That's all I got.
Any other questions?
You're in the middle of something. Continue.
Well, I was going to review my notes here quickly. Well, some of the other points in the American Fork letter, I'm particularly interested in water quality. That's my job. The hydrogeologic studies would not be of use to me personally in my job for assessing water quality. And there might be other questions that information could address, but I am first and foremost interested in the summarization of existing and future water quality information in the canyon, as well as the on-site best management practices used to control erosion and any revegetation efforts associated with development, that they're sufficient to protect water quality.
What is your background, your professional?
So I have 16 years with Division of Water Quality, and then prior to that, a master's in range science and bachelor's in environmental science. So I involved both with water side of things as well as the terrestrial vegetation side.
Have you reviewed the draft sampling and analysis plan for Mary Ellen Gulch?
I have not.
The letter from Cirrus references a number of reports that go back to 1943 and come forward all the way to the year 2000, 2009.
Mm-hmm.
Would you consider all the data in those reports, the 1940s reports, 1980s reports, inapplicable, or do they provide some valuable information as to the?
They provide good background. I did have a chance to query our database, online database, which is publicly available, and found water quality samples collected up to 2012, I believe, in the North Fork of the American Fork River. And so, as with anything, the more current the more applicable it is to current conditions, the more current the sampling date. But then you need to have that long-term history to assess trends and how things are evolving over time. So,
Are you familiar with the water quality in Little Cottonwood Canyon?
yes,
And are you part of the monitoring process of that water?
I am. My office is, yes. So,
But you're familiar with it?
yeah.
And,
Yep.
and do you have concerns with that water quality?
Yeah, in fact, it is not related to the mines. It's, the concern is with total dissolved solids or salts. And we see that peak in the wintertime. And I have some suspicions about the source of those salts.
Big trucks, pushing snow?
And that is the,
The state's doing that. Maybe we
Some-
can get a bond from people.
and there is a abandoned mine in the headwaters area of Little Cottonwood Canyon that is discharging, as is, the same situation as in upper reaches of American Fork Canyon. And we've been contemplating for many years what to do with that abandoned mine and the discharge from it. One thing, given recent events in Colorado, has impressed on me the importance of being careful around mine sites, and particularly the potential pitfalls of plugging abandoned mines. I do not support the plugging of abandoned mines, and that was a small statement in the American Fork City's letter. And so I would caution anyone to seriously consider plugging these draining mines, because things build up behind them, as we know in the case of Colorado. So that's a minor point.
So what remediation steps can be taken if you find increased or degradation in the water supply?
I've done a little bit of research on this in regards to that Little Cottonwood situation, and it relates to pH control. You want to try to precipitate the metals in the water and settle those out. And so there's a number of means to do that, and there was actually a pilot study done in Little Cottonwood Canyon that showed some promise. So that's...
So Snowbird was increasing the degradation of the water, and the state discovered that. Does the state have the authority to shut them down?
The state has the authority to require them to remediate and clean up the water to meet the background
And if
levels.
they can't do that? I mean, is it possible, that's a bad question. What if they can't remediate it?
I'm struggling to think of a situation where they couldn't, either by some means possible, trucking, piping.
So your experience
pH
has been
control.
that most bad water that has been able to be remediated and got back to where it's not palatable, but back to its degraded state.
Yeah. Now, there's lots of engineering and technological, studies and efforts that have gone into this nationwide, and we have yet to
And the cost for that remediation will be borne by that actor.
source of the contamination.
And then that's the ability the state has to find the actor. And
Yep.
I'm sorry. Don't.
And there was another mention earlier about the situation at the drinking water plant at the mouth of Little Cottonwood Canyon that, I don't know, Kate, if you had a specific mention of, but,
An incident there?
no, their procedures for testing.
I'm not an expert on drinking water treatment, but typically the first step in the treatment process would be to precipitate out suspended materials. So, including probably the salts that Carl already mentioned, but if there was particulate runoff from some of the mine dumps, it would be captured at that stage. And then later steps in the process would adjust any pH issues and address any dissolved materials that were in the drinking water.
Any further questions?
Do you have any other questions? Okay, thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Appreciate that. Thanks for making yourselves known.
Can I make a quick comment?
Sure.
We were talking about the location of drinking water sources, and it's true that there are the community drinking water sources that are the furthest east are the two American Fork Springs. But there are other drinking water sources that are also considered to be public water sources. They're associated with some of the summer home communities and a campground that are much, much closer to the Mary Ellen Gulch area and Mineral Basin.
How are they monitored?
Well, those are, I always think this is an awkward term. They're considered transient, non-community systems. The systems, of course, are not transient, but the people who visit them are. They come and go, and they're not there year-round as someone who, the community system is a system that's mostly populated by people who are in their homes and drinking the water 365 days a year and throughout most of the day. So the reason EPA makes that distinction is because of the relative risk associated with the way we drink water. If you're only exposed to water that might have a contaminant in it over very short periods of time and not for very long, the risk of drinking something like a metal isn't like, unfortunately, let's say in Flint, where they're drinking lead-tainted water right now. In a transient system, the risk is not as high because you're not exposed for very long. So those systems are not required to sample for metals. It's not impossible that there are elevated metal levels in that water. The things that they are required to sample for are just bacteria and nitrates, and that's because those things can cause acute illness. So they would make you very sick very fast, and hence that's why they're required to do that. I also wanted to comment that American Fork, as far as I know, I don't know where Nestor went, but hey, they don't have to treat their sources, and the water on the Snowbird side is, of course, treated when it gets to the mouth of the canyon. It wouldn't meet drinking water standards without that. So.
Okay, thank you. You're welcome. Mr. Banks, you have a comment?
Yes. You don't want to hear from me, but I'd love you to hear from some of the experts to address some of the issues that were raised from some of the gentlemen from American Fork City. And with your indulgence, I'd like to ask, at least initially, two gentlemen to come forth and address some of those specific issues briefly. One is the fellow who has run the Special Service District in Little Cottonwood Canyon for years, who has a lot of experience in terms of mining works and managing water for the public. And second, to address some of those specific issues, is the engineer that you've met before, Mr. Neil Arts with the Cirrus Environmental Consulting Firm, if that would be okay.
How do you feel about that? Yeah.
Yeah, good evening. My name is Keith Hansen. I'm the general manager of Salt Lake County Service Area 3. We're the water and sewer purveyors in Little Cottonwood Canyon. And, you know, I've got about 30 years experience with the water district in Little Cottonwood Canyon. And water quality is, you know, the number one concern for me and for my customers. We worked very closely with Salt Lake City Public Utilities, the Metropolitan Water District of Salt Lake City and Sandy. They are the ones who run the 118 million gallon a day surface water treatment plant at the mouth of the canyon. We have, in Little Cottonwood, we have two underground drinking water sources, both from mine tunnels, and we treat and remove heavy metals and make drinking water from those mine sources. In fact, We bulkheaded and plugged the Wasatch Drain Tunnel, the largest tunnel in Little Cottonwood Canyon, in 1985, backed the water up 300 feet deep in that mine, and we used that as a drinking water source. By doing so with that tunnel, we improve the water quality in the creek because we have control of the discharge to the creek, and also by not allowing the free oxidation to occur in the free-flowing water in the mine tunnels, we don't get the heavy metals loads down into the creek. So Little Cottonwood there's over 100 miles of mine tunnel in Little Cottonwood Canyon, and you know, they made a statement about where are these tunnels and can we find them? Well, we know where those tunnels are. We know where the tunnels are in this area as well. We can find those. The issue with the lift towers and mine tunnels is one that really is not, at this stage of the game, in my opinion, super critical. Is the water quality in American Fork Canyon, you know, potentially impaired? Yes. In Little Cottonwood, we've been working since 1996. Carl Adams spoke about we've got a mine. Little Cottonwood Canyon is impaired from a 303D cold water standard because of zinc. The exceedance, there's up to 5 parts per million of zinc in that water coming from abandoned mine workings. Snowbird, Alta, Salt Lake City, Metropolitan Water District, Salt Lake County, DEQ, EPA. We've all been working on this for 20 years to improve the water quality in Little Cottonwood. From you know, the coliform standpoints, the turbidity standpoint, we've seen improvements in Little Cottonwood Canyon. The salt is a concern in the lower portion of the canyon. Another thing about the heavy metals is by the time that water gets to the Metropolitan Water District, they don't see the metals. You know, the dilution coming down the canyon is significant. It's a very small portion, and I'm not an expert on water, on the groundwater stuff, but I do know from the loading that I've looked at in American Fork Canyon is very insignificant, you know, due to the amount of water that is coming down those two drainages. So, you know, one of the things I will say is I feel like Snowbird has been a good steward. They have worked well with other stakeholders in Little Cottonwood Canyon for 30 years to make things better. Erosion control, between Alta and Snowbird, I don't know, what do they have, 15 lifts, 20 lifts? You know, we've already got a couple of lifts in American Fork. And we have not, in the construction of any of those lifts, had adverse reactions to water quality. I think that the ski resorts can be good stewards of the watershed because it's vital to them, and I think that their revegetation efforts and erosion control efforts, you know, they work well, and I think that as this thing moves forward, you may be able to see through their actions that they are committed to making this work. Do you guys have any questions for me?
Of course I do.
Great.
What is your opinion as to the impact of the ski towers being placed in Mary Ellen Gulch on the water?
Well, I think that, you know, once
And
this...
and with that, I mean, that's not a fair question, but with that, what limitations, if any, would you place on them, the location of those lift towers?
Well, obviously, we want to keep them out of the wetlands, and we want to keep them out of where the known underground workings are. Even, you know, one of the things about that, drilling and blasting is not going to have a significant impact on those towers. I drilled and blasted 2 years ago at the portal of the mine that's backing up 35 million gallons of water. And we did that. Obviously, we did our homework before we did any of that kind of work. The lift towers don't have a significant large footprint. So, you know, you're talking about excavation and a footing. I'm not an expert on lifts, but generally I would say a footing is 6 by 6 by 10 feet deep. So they're going to go into that rock, look at where their alignments are, and I think that working through that building process, they can determine that this is a safe place to drill this, and then once again use their best management practices. I do like what they brought up, a detailed emergency response plan for the worst case scenario is probably something that's beneficial, but they've worked through those things with other construction projects that have been done in Little Cottonwood Canyon. Did that help answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Anything else? Thank you.
Thank you.
While Mr. Arts is coming up, if I could just add a couple of points, please, is in response to the location of the tower foundations. It's an easy task to survey and figure out where the portals are along the proposed path. And there's also some terrific ground penetrating radar that can be implemented as a matter of best management practice for that construction issue to make sure that you're not going into any tunnels. And we would certainly commit to implementing that as one of the best management practices. Go ahead, Neil.
Hello, good to see you guys again. My name's Neil Arts, and I'm with Cirrus Ecological Solutions. By way of qualifications for this kind of work, that as other people have reiterated theirs, I have a PhD from the College of Natural Resources at USU, and have been working in the environmental field for 25 years. Eric Duffin, our watershed scientist, is here tonight. He has a master's degree in that discipline from USU. Our staff member who did the visual analysis, a BYU master's degree, is also here today. We've been in business since 2000 under our own shingle. And in that time, we've addressed water quality in a number of different scenarios, of regulatory scenarios, including assisting the Forest Service in almost 50 EA and environmental impact statement level analyses for winter recreation development. We've assisted the state DWQ in 12 TMDL studies. We assisted Salt Lake County in preparing their water quality stewardship plan. Through all these investigations, I think what set us apart and accounts for our solid relationship with the agencies is our commitment to objectivity and to sound science. And I'm confident that that's why we were selected as the independent contractor to assess these impacts of Snowbird's proposed project. That said, I had prepared remarks here to run through as briefly as possible, recognizing your time requirements, and to supplement the information that we provided to the county in the past. I'm going to break from them some because a lot of the questions have been answered that I intended to address, and some new issues have come up. I think first off, this feeling that's been expressed that the water quality dynamics in that canyon are quite complicated and quite poorly studied. I just don't believe that either are the case. We've supplied a lot of the reports that we've consulted and data that we've tapped to complete our assessment to the county planning staff. And I guess the short of it is that those past studies weren't really completed. This assertion that they all assumed that there'd be no development, I don't think that's the case. Those studies were completed to analyze what kind of a problem do we have here and what can we do about it. And that's what they did. And through the course of that, in intensive studies since the 70s and through 2000, problem water quality, mining-related water quality issues have been identified. Remediation plans have been developed and they've been done. And that's all resulted in significant improvements in water quality. It was stated that the Mary Ellen Creek drainage is toxic and dump it into where it dumps into the North Fork, and that's no longer true. It was in the past, but since remediation efforts done by Snowbird have been completed in conjunction with some other players, that water quality went from not meeting cold water fisheries standards, which are more stringent in terms of most metals than drinking water standards are, 100 feet below the mine tailings. Prior to that drain being installed and the reroute of the water, it didn't meet cold water fishery standards, and now it does just 1,000 feet below the mine tailings pile. From that point on, it continues to gain water, and by the time it joins the North Fork of the American Fork, it meets what drinking water standards. So it's hardly a toxic stream flowing into there. Another indication from those past studies is people have talked a lot about total metals versus dissolved metals. And not to get too technical with that, but the statement was made that water running past tailings piles and stuff dissolves these metals and puts them into the water supply. And we have data here in my hand that shows that in those tailings piles, total metals concentrations are up to 200 times more than dissolved metals concentrations. And by dissolved, it means when you run an acid solution over them, equivalent to acid rain, how much of that total metal do you take off and put into the water supply? And it's a very small fraction of the total metals up there, which means that what we're really talking about is surface water transport of the soil, the material that's in those piles, not groundwater contamination and not dissolved metals in the water. That said, we recognize that the watershed's in an anti-degradation standard, so to put that in context, the potential for any undertaking in this small project area at the top of Mary Ellen Gulch to have a degrading effect on those water resources has to be viewed in terms of a lot of math that I can dumb down and summarize, say in as few numbers as possible. The area is small. It's 2.2% of the watershed. Somebody said that already. The water, the offending water that drains through the project area, when it leaves the project area, has an annual average flow of about 3%, or excuse me, 3 CFS. And that equates to 5% over time of the total flow of the American Fork River, and to less than 0.5% of the total groundwater recharge to the northern Utah Valley Aquifer. It's 10 river miles upstream from the springs that we're talking about at the canyon mouth. And dilution effect as flow increases, which there are other ways to look at water quality. Certainly the load is the opposite, just how much net metal is there in the water. But the standards are expressed, and the risks of use are expressed and defined in terms of concentration. So at the end of the day, the solution to pollution is dilution, and you've got 20-fold dilution before you get to the mouth of the canyon, to the area where groundwater is recharged. So in short, it would take a fairly dramatic increase in metals released from the project site up there to result in degradation, or in terms of the county's ordinance and CUP regulations, in a unreasonable degradation or diminution of water quality. So to get more to the brass tacks, the effects on culinary water seem to be the highest priority here. As noted, drinking water is taken from several springs near the mouth of the canyon, from 2 springs in terms of municipal water at the mouth of the canyon, and then a number of these smaller communal water sources are the transient water sources and so forth, a couple of campgrounds, a couple of summer home communities, cabin communities, and so forth. Each one of those water sources has a source protection plan that has to be developed and approved by the state, by the Division of Drinking Water Quality. And including the 2 American Fork City springs at the bottom of the canyon, the recharge areas are in fact defined empirically doing the science on them. They're mapped. We have the maps. I think they're among the materials we've submitted to planning. They extend up above the river. They extend up the slope as they would in a gaining reach of the stream. The water's coming into the stream up there, not going out. And the recharge areas extend in defined polygons above those springs. So they're simply not susceptible to any impact of this project because groundwater impacts, for the reasons we've discussed, aren't in play. And the only way that the river water itself could affect them is if it flooded over the wellheads.
So explain to me again, I don't think the concern is the river. I think at least my concern is the groundwater. Because nobody knows what's going on underneath that dirt. So why is the groundwater that is filling the spring for American Fork City not going to be impacted by putting in a ski tower?
Well, I'll give a short answer, but I'll also cite Carl Adams' response that the hydrogeologic study is not a concern to him in terms of water quality. And my understanding is that's because of the geology of these mountains are such that it's folded, that any beds are folded. They include materials, carbonaceous materials, that like limestone and so forth, that the water doesn't pass through, that absorb the evils, these kind of metals and so forth. And it's a long ways. So there's a hydrogeologist that will have comments later, and Carl Adams was here as well.
Comments?
More information, excuse me, this isn't comments, it's information. The other thing to consider, I think, is that, as I mentioned before, what we're talking about is total metals and not dissolved metals, and it takes dissolved metals to move through the water to get into groundwater in that sense. Now, this is all talking about up in the canyon and the springs and so forth in the canyon. Once you leave the canyon and get into the groundwater recharge zone tapped by these municipal wells for culinary water, then it's a different story, which I'll get to in a sec. But up there, the blasting, as several speakers have said, blasting, excavation, and so forth, isn't resulting in their experience or ours with cracking fissures in the rock and letting contaminated mine water into the groundwater. It's just because of distances, the materials involved, and the fact, I think, that there's been nothing's been established if there's any pools of contaminated water in the system up there. Remains to be seen, but the evidence of our investigation is that there's not. So, in that those springs have limited to no potential to be impacted, and that the water coming out of the canyon mouth at this point is real clean. It's rated by the USGS as that portion of the American Fork River that goes into groundwater recharge, which is roughly 28%. I guess that's not too rough. It's 28% of the river's flow that goes into groundwater recharge. Is rated as the highest quality, the youngest and the freshest and highest quality water that enters that aquifer.
Could you just so we could understand broadly, and I think I know the answer to this, but I'd like to hear from experts, just go over how big this aquifer is. I mean, this is an enormous recharge area, is it not? I mean, the aquifer is, describe it for me.
Well, it stretches from Provo Bay to Point of the Mountain, and from this one side of the valley to the other. The square mileage of that, I can't say off the top of my head. And its groundwater, its annual recharge amount is 153,000 acre feet. The majority of that, 70% of it, comes from not from tributary input like including American Fork,
right,
but from the bedrock aquifer of the mountains. And that's the water that we're talking about here, that's groundwater, and it's remote, it's deep. Any metals that it includes are dissolved, and it's just not affected it's not affected at that point in the mountains by the surface water system. It's what stays in and not what runs down.
I have a quick question for you. At what point or what location are you proposing testing the water from this area?
At the project boundary. I think there's enough water, there's enough dynamics going on, which, by the way, talking about Salt Lake County's regulations here, in a number of, I don't know any way that in that portion of the American Fork ones that they are more strict than what appeared in American Fork City's letter, but that includes their monitoring requirement is at the property line for the water quality constituents of concern to them. And in that case, as mentioned before, it's some salts, some TDS, and coliform. But to try and link an impact on a downstream spring or anything else in the system really would make a defensible link to what goes on in Mary Ellen Gulch would be tenuous science at best. So our take, I think DWQ, the Division of Water Quality, and Salt Lake County and their monitoring program would agree that what's coming off of your property, what's what we're interested in and what we want to monitor is what's coming off of your project area. How it moves through the system starts making it harder and harder to attach any blame or anything.
And just to clarify, the water coming from the subject property, from Snowbird's property, flows downhill, and then does it flow into Table Fork?
It does. It flows into the Mary Ellen Gulch Creek, flows into North Fork of American Fork, and hence into Table Fork Reservoir.
Okay, and so what is your opinion if something was to get into the water once it hit Table Fork?
What would happen once it got to Table Fork?
Yeah, if it made it that far.
Yeah. Well, in that it's mostly not dissolved. It, as has been indicated here, would tend to settle out in sediment. When the Forest Service did investigations of metals in that watershed back in the early 90s and so forth, they found no such accumulation of metals in Table Fork sediments. They happened to, Ted Fitzgerald is here and tested sound. I don't know any way when the reservoir was drawn down, and it didn't find anything too alarming anyway. I won't put words in his mouth, but that's what his reporting indicated. And at that point, I mean, it's in a worst case scenario, it's nice to have a reservoir in the middle of your system. If you've got total metals issues and TDS, it's good to have a place for them to stop. But beyond that, in terms, I guess, of that overall issue of degradation, in most science and most of these kind of investigations, you have to speculate and really wonder what's going to go on. And I think we were kind of on the right vein in discussions earlier when we realized that we have the rare benefit of this experiment has already been done. You know, there was a lot more disturbance, nothing's more disturbing to that bedrock and so forth than mining, which continued into the 40s. Disturbance of tailings piles, there's probably no bigger disturbance than when they're actually being piled. And we've gone through 40 years of monitoring of the wells in this aquifer, and it started out, has maintained, and virtually been without a blip the best quality aquifer in the area. So, in that sense, the proof's in the pudding that much more disturbance has gone up there in the past without affecting that aquifer's water quality than anything that Snowbird's proposing to do. But given so I think that at least helps me put this whole risky business into context and conclude that it's not very risky. With those generalities aside, then what could, if it's an anti-degradation watershed, so Ted Fitz would have been brought up to say what might create that impact that you're talking about. How could we put more metals into the water here? I guess the construction's been the first level one, and in terms of just general overview, construction and remediation, I think it's meaningful to say that Snowbird is in Salt Lake City's municipal watershed and has been under the magnifying glass for decades since they started. And as a result of that, and given our observations of 50 other ski area projects, where water quality is always a concern for very similar reasons to this project. Snowbird's remediation approach, their construction BMPs, their attention to detail to keeping bad stuff out of the water there has really become the model for the industry. The Forest Service has worked with them, Salt Lake County has worked with them, and as a result, they've come up to where they've pretty much written a book on how to do this kind of development without adverse impacts on water quality. They're the test case for the Forest Service's ski area best management practices handbook. In terms of potential impacts on the mine workings themselves, on tailing piles, the first mitigation measure in the application says we're not going to directly, indirectly excavate, grade, undercut anything that would destabilize and affect these tailings piles. Then we assume that those anti-degradation measures would all be made conditions of approval of the CUP. In terms of this possibility of excavating and breaking into a mine tunnel, as Keith indicated, we know pretty well where they are. Some of the old drawings that show mine workings, they might be old, but they're beautiful, and they're more detailed than you'd ever see from anything now. The only problem with them is getting them geo-rectified, and that's where new technology steps in, and we can survey and know that's where that is. The historical documents that we talk about how mining developed in the watershed, we know all of that. So even though we may not know where towers go, where lift towers go at this point, because the lift designers and engineers have to come in and figure that out first, we know where they won't be. And they won't be on mine tailings piles, and we have the wherewithal to make sure that they're not over a mine tunnel. And it occurs to me, not to be too facetious or too trite about it, but if you're digging a hole 10 feet deep and worried about hitting a mine tunnel, then you got to think that digging tunnels is hard work. Miners didn't dig them for sport. If a miner needed to be 10 feet under where you want to put that tower, he'd have dug where you're digging. You know, it's not, the tunnels don't ease around in shallow depths and sneak up on you. They're known and they're deep. And if you're within 10 feet of one, you're probably in good eyesight of the hole in the ground and the big pile of dirt that was dug to make it. So I think the idea of inadvertently digging into a mine tunnel just doesn't, it's not a serious concern. Okay, the other potential, or another potential, that's been noted in the past studies and that we've discussed in the and so forth, and that has been mentioned by board members, is recreation. And in that case, that's an issue where total metals rather than dissolved ones definitely come into play, because some of those mine tailings are nasty. And running a motorized vehicle around on them, anything that creates dust where it's going to be breathed by humans is a bad thing, and it releases material to where overland flow and the next rainfall and so forth will carry it into the water system. And to date, recreational use, as you noted, has been unregulated. It's increasing. Motorized use in particularly is a problem. And Snowbird might not have had the policy to regulate it in the past, but neither did they have really the means to regulate it, because it's an isolated place. Our assessment indicates that if they're back there, have access, have a human presence back there all the time, then they have the ability to preclude access, which is another stipulation, another mitigation measure listed in their application. It's they can make sure that it doesn't happen. They're not doing it themselves, and they can keep the public recreation, all recreation, off of those mine tailings piles. Another thing that recreation could threaten is, and this has to do with that potential for perhaps a big body of water being backed up in the Live Yankee mine. I think you're aware of their efforts working with Ted Fitzgerald, with Trout Unlimited and so forth, to create a drain structure in one of the portals of that mine. There are at least 2 other portals that drain water too, so it's not as if whatever's going on there is the only thing that dictates how much water is in that mine. But point being that they they've constructed that improvement, that remediation, which results in a dramatic improvement in water quality immediately below the site. And it takes maintenance that's been noted in the, if they can maintain it to the degree that it's effectively maintained, it continues to route water around the tailings pile and achieve those water quality objectives. And the other thing it does is assure a drain, that any water that's accumulating in that tunnel actually does drain. It's got cobble rock behind it, geotex fabric over it, covered with earth. Its intent is to keep water flowing through there, and it doesn't tex fabric over it. It drains 1 to 2 CFS, a third of the volume of the pipe, a quarter of the volume of the pipe, and if there was a big body of water back there exerting pressure on that, it'd be coming out harder than that, it'd fill the pipe. So, to our estimation, that looks like a system that's in equilibrium. As water builds up in the tunnel, it drains. And then in terms of winter recreation, as is, I guess, logic and it dictates and has been said here, it's not happening any place but over several feet of snow that preclude any impact on the ground surface. Anyway, so that recreational user days, the number of people recreating there would certainly increase, but what they're doing would be much less impactful on these potential sources of contaminants. Avalanches. The avalanche issue has come up, and maybe we don't need to belabor that. It's a couple of people have touched on it, but avalanches generally don't affect soil surfaces. The big nasty ones that they say run to the ground can take vegetation away, certainly. Tree and shrub kind of vegetation don't usually affect the herbaceous vegetation on the ground. Such immediately below the site. That type of avalanche is exactly what a ski area's avalanche management program is intended to avoid. Let's get more frequent, lower intensity avalanches and avoid any damage to infrastructure or personnel or to mine tailings piles. And in this case, the tailings piles that are of most concern are located at below a big knob that's spanned on either side by major slide paths, but protected from them. So by whatever small incremental risk of disturbance of these tailings piles due to avalanche there is, it'll be reduced by what they're proposing to do. So I guess our conclusion through this is that in terms of the overall threat to any culinary water supply, if problems were going to be evident, you'd have seen them by now. Before remediation projects took place that considerably reduced the amount of metals contamination being introduced into the system. And based on what we've observed and summarized here, there's just no reason to think that this project would lead to any degradation, much less an unreasonable diminishment of water quality as per the ordinance. And for a couple of reasons, it could result in a reduced risk for a couple of reasons, like recreation management, like maintaining the drain. So that's what I had to say.
Okay, thank you.
Neil, were you in the discussions with American Fork City?
I was.
You were there, so you shared all this information with American Fork?
Oh, they got the whole 20-minute presentation there.
They got the whole, how long did that just take? I think that was at least 1 minute.
I keep being told it's a little dry.
All right, they got 2 more minutes. I was just hopeful that there was stuff that they weren't hearing for the first time tonight, so thank you.
Chairman, as a closer, could we offer one other employee from the Division of Water Quality who's familiar with both sides of the canyons for some observations on kind of what's been said, what's been provided already, and some conclusions in that regard?
You okay with that? Okay, sure.
And while she's coming up, to your question about avalanche control work, we won't bring him up unless you're chomping at the bit to hear it, but we've got a 40-year veteran that will tell us of the absence of any impacts there. I take it that's a pass. Okay, it's in the record. The testimony's in the record, and likewise, another gentleman with years of experience on the process of recharging from as the question you posed, Member Roberts, was the process of any metals recharging from the surface water down into the groundwater. If you've had enough, fine. If you'd like a little more specific conversation on that, be happy to bring him up as well. Okay, thank you.
I'm going to be brief. My name is Hilary Arens, and I'm representing myself today. But I am an 8-year veteran of the Utah Division of Water Quality. I've worked with a number of the folks in American Fork. I'm the Jordan Basin and Utah Lake coordinator, and I really care about the water quality. Nestor, as you know, we worked on Utah Lake together. So I really do empathize with what your fears are and what the catastrophe could result in should something go wrong. My credentials, I have a master's degree in watershed science from Colorado State, and I've been in the field of water quality for 12 years, so I would consider myself an expert, and I would think that those that worked with me would as well. Couple of things. We spoke about Little Cottonwood Canyon and American Fork and what the differences are between those.
Could we offer one other employee?
Little Cottonwood Canyon is classified as a beneficial use for drinking water. So there's different standards that the water quality that comes out of that canyon need to meet the beneficial uses for drinking water. American Fork is not classified as a drinking water source, so it doesn't have to meet the same quality of water that comes out of the canyon. As Carl Adams said, those up in the headwaters can't make the conditions worse. Now, how we do this, first off, American Fork isn't impaired for metals. It hasn't been on the 303D list for clean water. It has not been impaired for metals. The same standards and the same sampling protocols apply for all the canyons, but the results determine what goes on that 303D list of the Clean Water Act. How we keep from having a catastrophic problem, which seems to be the fear, right? Something erupting, some digging occurring. So what Snowbird has developed, and I have reviewed, is a sampling and analysis plan. And I think that Snowbird would be amendable to working with the Division of Water Quality and American Fork should they have comments or some additions to the sampling. That sampling and analysis plan is a part of a requirement with the Division of Water Quality for the construction permit. And so I think that that's where we need to focus on. The construction permit is intended to not develop in sensitive areas. And part of that application with the Division of Water Quality requires that sampling and analysis plan and avoiding sensitive areas. So those sensitive areas that the construction permit would require would Canyon and American Fork, and what they mean not building the towers onto the mine tailing piles. And as Neil mentioned, knowing through survey and georectifying places where the mine tunnels are, not building onto those. So that would be part of what the approval would be for the construction permit through the Division of Water Quality.
Sorry to interrupt,
That's okay.
but just to be clear, you're saying that the Utah Division of Water Quality has input on the building permit?
No, the construction permit. Well, building of the towers with a construction permit, sure.
So they get a building permit from Utah County and they have to get a construction permit from
Yes.
the
Division of Water Quality, which has permitted lift towers in the past many times, lift towers that have occurred where there has been other mining, other historic mining. So part of the construction permit process is writing that sample and analysis plan. You got a question?
No, I just am amazed at government.
I know.
Permit everything.
Yeah, but that's what's going to protect the resource, right? So during construction, there's going to be best management practices that are going to be required. That includes not bulldozing over mine tailings, setting up water bars, setting up sedimentation fences, hay
So do
on
other
the
people
soil.
have input into that process besides just the applicant and the state of Utah? For example,
American Fork City. Yeah,
Can it come to the meeting?
yes, it's an open public application. I believe that DWQ would be welcome. So those sensitive areas at the welcome American Fork in that process, the sampling and finalizing the sampling.
So they get to do this again.
Different. This is,
This is the first time we're hearing about this process.
Well-
Going to show up.
this isn't new. A construction permit.
No, it's new to us because we're doing it every day. It's not new to you.
Okay.
We would know to show up at the meeting.
It's not a meeting, is an application with the state.
Okay, then how can we get public input if you said it was?
I said that Division of Water Quality would likely welcome input from American Fork City in this process.
This is the key, that you don't know any of this stuff. It's been so rushed. It's the first time.
This isn't a new process. This isn't rushed. This is a standard application for construction, and anywhere within a watershed, this is required. This isn't new.
Excuse me, just focus here, we can have a comment later.
Thank you. So a construction permit requires a sampling and analysis plan, which I have reviewed, and it's comprehensive and goes above and beyond what other ski areas have submitted for their construction permit sampling and analysis plans. Finally, my experience with Snowbird, having done work on the Little Cottonwood Creek side, is that they're really receptive to doing the right thing, and they're really receptive to not furthering environmental impacts. And the state has had a very good relationship with Snowbird with all of the cleanup and remediation projects we've been involved with.
Thank you. Any other questions here?
Talked about the transition.
Yes?
I'm sorry, question?
No.
You want me to talk about that? Okay, I believe that DW. So with that, as a private citizen up here, I have been with the Division of Water Quality for 8 years, and Snowbird has recently hired me to manage their water resources and environmental programs. And wearing those hats, being a steward of the state and caring about water quality, I know that Snowbird's ethics is to do the right thing up there, and that is why they hired me to oversee this.
You work for Division of Water Quality?
I still work for the Division of Water Quality.
But regardless.
I do not do contract work for Snowbird.
Excuse us, you don't get the vote. So just to make sure we understand, the process is a building permit with the county, and if that is approved, Snowbird still has to get a construction permit from the Division of Water Quality.
Correct.
From somebody hired to work for Snowbird.
Okay, thank you. That's fine.
As with Snowbird is the conditional use is not compatible with the public interest. According to it shall be compatible with the public interest and with the characteristics of the surrounding area because it does not meet the standard of section 7-20C4.
Does that focus on those two topics that we have here? Because I think we've gone over.
Well, I think this appeals to American Fork Canyon. No. What I'd like to say is the conditional use is not compatible with characteristics of the surrounding area. The area is adjacent to the Twin Peaks, the highest peaks in the central Wasatch Range, and the White Pine Wilderness area. The proposed chairlift, zip line, and warming hut are merely yards away from the wilderness area. The surrounding land is some of the most pristine in the central Wasatch Range. The gondola and lift towers and noise of zip lines and mechanization are visible from much of the Timpanogos and Box Elder wilderness areas and many spots along the scenic Alpine Loop Road as well as many hiking and recreation areas in the canyon. According to the current American Fork Canyon Vision Survey, so I just got to stop. Everybody else kept going.
Yeah, well, I don't think we're talking on the topic, specifically on the roads. You're talking more generally here, so.
Yeah, what general doesn't cover everything. I mean, I'm trying to.
We talked a lot about these other topics.
Well, yeah, I'm just trying to reiterate on the conditional use. They're not meeting it at all for the public interest.
Paige Albrecht. Eldon Park. Mark Allen.
Mark Allen, formerly of Protect and Preserve American Fork Canyon, now of, as well as that, American Fork Canyon Alliance, a nonprofit, filing in Utah County, state of Utah. Curtin McConkey is our representation. We are opening up that area of land to 30, 40, 50,000 citizens that would like to have access year-round to parcels up there. So we're very concerned about not only the county roads, but prescriptive easements. Robert Redford, he would never try and close the Aspen Loop Road, but he bought land that was encumbered with prescriptive easements. Snowbird's done the same. So we're mincing words, we're splitting things, but it's not just roads, but it's trails as well. Ingress and egress trails, things that they bought knowing that there was a right-of-way. So that's really the issue. They bought it encumbered the same way they did with the mine tailings. So I have two questions. Why don't they keep those roads open? Why don't they mark them? They've beguiled a lot of people that go up that are honest because they haven't posted their property. Secondarily, as we want to have winter access, I'm concerned about their avalanche program as we're going to be cross-country skiing up there, and there's no mitigation plan in place. So I'd like to see them mark all their property boundaries. Have any of you gentlemen been up there? You go up there, there's no way to tell whose land is what. The county still doesn't even have maps. We did a grant to try and get the county GIS. They don't have maps. I think it's premature. I think all you gentlemen need some more time to digest. I've spent 1,500 hours in the last 8 months. I've learned a lot. Last week I spent 90 minutes with law enforcement that asked me to turn over my papers to them. So I have. This is above and beyond. This is above and beyond. I've got freedom of speech, please. If I will come and listen for 3 hours to these folks babble, give me 2 minutes. I represent 10,000 households. Please put your sign down. I won't give you a stop sign. Please.
Let him talk.
I represent 10,000 people. I represent 10,000 people.
Do you have one final comment to say?
They've had 40 years of a free ride on polluting American Fork Canyon and Tibble Fork. Now citizens, taxpayers, we can't dredge it. It's too dangerous. When will they own up to that? When will you hold them to own up to that point of pollution? It's your kids, your grandkids' water. Thank you.
Rob Shelton. Oh, you already spoken. This on these two issues? Okay.
I want to apologize for my outburst. That's what I wanted to do, so I apologize for that. It was just very frustrating because it's hard sitting in a meeting getting information for the first time, and I know where you sit, and so it's hard keeping public decorum, so I just want to offer that apology publicly for that outburst. But I appreciate your time and look forward to what your decision you guys make. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris Cushing. Eric Goodrich.
Good evening. My name is Eric Goodrich. I'm a resident of Cedar Hills, and I'm also counsel for the Utah Four-Wheel Drive Association, the Utah ATV Association, and the Utah Snowmobile Association. I sent you gentlemen a letter yesterday about rights-of-way issues. I think that we're missing the point. Every time I hear Snowbird open its mouth, they say, our private property, and they continue to reinforce that theme. Under the rights-of-way statute, it is no longer, these access roads are no longer their private property. When a road is dedicated through use, and it only has to be used continuously for 10 years, that road becomes public property. And that's what we are contending is the situation here. Those roads show on public maps. They have been claimed by the county. They show on county maps. And just
we don't have jurisdiction over roads. I agree with you 100%. If they're historic roads, Class D roads, they cannot cut you off. But we can't give them the power, or you the power, to drive on the roads. We don't have that jurisdiction.
I'm not, that power is already there.
That's right.
What I am asking is you not approve a conditional use permit that interferes with those roads and jeopardizes public safety. Right. If you look at the map behind you, there are roads going all across Snowbird's property. They say in their conditional use application, our solution to our avalanche control problems and public safety issues is we'll just close the road at the right, in certain seasons and as necessary. And what I am saying is that that is not lawful. And it's not lawful for the Board of Adjustments to also render a decision that would allow them to simply steamroll over those roads. They're county roads. 2 days ago, the County Commission passed a resolution, and it said public access should not be interfered with. And we are simply urging you to not interfere with those public access roads. If you cannot answer the question as to whether those are lawful public routes, it is not safe for the public to approve this application. Thank you.
Thank you for all your comments. I hope I didn't miss anybody. Did you sign up?
I did.
What's your name?
Cal Taylor.
Okay, I don't know if I got all the sheets. Is it just one? Is anyone else? Okay, Cal.
I'll be brief. My name is Cal Taylor, and I represent the Utah Snowmobile Association. I'm their vice president. Real quick, our goal is to promote, protect, and defend safe and responsible snowmobile use now and for future generations. I won't reiterate some of the things that other people have done. I'm a skier as well, kind of a hybrid kind of guy. But anyway, so there's lots of area up there. The acreage has been traditionally available to the snowmobile community, should most definitely remain available to snowmobiling in any final outcome of uses for American Fork Canyon. We do know that it's our law-abiding citizenship to stay off of private property, but we also get to ride on Forest Service land. So we just want to make sure that that stays in place, and along with the historical roads that's already been stated. I can end my comments there. Thank you.
Thank you, Cal. Thank you, everyone, for your comments. We'll close public comment this time. I'd like to have discussions by members of the board in terms of your feelings at this point on where to go and how to proceed.
Court, does the county have a stance on that easement issue with the roads as to whether that's our responsibility to? I mean, I know up to the Class D it is, that's clear, and I think that's where we've arrived, but I'm talking about beyond the Class D and the 10-year access issue.
You're talking about the public thoroughfare issue.
I suspect.
Those kinds of cases are highly fact sensitive. It can take years to go through the courts. It would really, you'd really be left guessing what is or isn't a public thoroughfare.
Thank you.
Well,
guys with some comments then, I guess, and we can go back and forth here. I mean, I'm convinced that Snowbird is a good partner, and the last thing that Snowbird wants is to pollute the water, the drinking water, or do anything to harm the environment. I get that. And they have built a fantastic relationship with Sandy City to the point that the mayor and city council have sent us a letter that said, you know, we have a great partnership, continue it. But there seems to be a disconnect with the folks, at least in the American Fork government side. I mean, I've heard that American Fork City State, they don't have any idea where the tunnels are, and then you guys come up here and say, yeah, we know where the tunnels are. I'm just wondering where the communication gap exists, and if some more time would build that. I mean, I did hear, and this was comforting to me to hear Casey Wright say, American Fork City, I don't know if I have a perfect quote, but American Fork welcomes Snowbird. We don't want to stop development. We just want to protect our water. If the water issue becomes their club to stop development, then I think we're at loggerheads here. But if it's really just trying to get some information shared about the water, I think they both want the same result. I think Snowbird and American Fork City are on common ground. They just haven't communicated correctly with each other. So, I mean, aesthetics, access, public safety, public welfare, property values, avalanche control.
Sandy City took gifts from Snowbird. That's the difference.
I will mention one thing on that topic. If anybody thinks any member of this board has taken a gift, they better think again. So, I don't know. I guess I'm to the point where, can we make some progress if we give some more time on this? I don't know. I'd like to hear what the board thinks. I'm really disappointed when I hear polarizing statements from people that say, irregardless of what you do, this is going to court. I don't think that does anybody any good. And if that's where we're headed, we might as well just make a decision now and pull out of it. But if there really is some common ground that we can find, and 30 days or 60 days will get us there, then I'd be ready to make the motion for some more time. But I don't know how the members will feel.
Well, I don't feel qualified to determine the impact on the water. And we've had a number of experts speak to that point today. But I'm very comforted in the fact the Department of Water Quality from the state of Utah is going to be involved in the future construction of this. And nothing's going to happen with those improvements unless it complies with their standards. And so that gives me a lot of comfort tonight to say, I'm okay with this proposal.
My big question was whether or not Snowbird would have to go ahead and prove that where they're going to put the towers is in fact going to be safe. And my understanding from the conversation tonight was in fact that that's part of getting a building permit. So I'm ready to move forward.
So we have a couple different ideas here. One is to make a vote to possibly vote on the proposal. One would be to put it off some time for more discussion. I'm also a little disappointed that American Fork and Snowbird haven't been able to, it's only been 4 weeks, which is understandable, but to really work through, because the conditions that American Fork has proposed are quite, quite substantial, and so there hasn't been really a meeting in the middle here at this point in terms of some of their feelings. So I'm a little bit hesitant in terms of moving on, but would like to see some kind of resolution to this permit process.
I'm prepared to make a motion. So I would move that we approve appeal number 1552, subject to the conditions set forth in paragraph 4 of the staff's position. That would be paragraph numbers 1 through 12, with the limitations on the size of the huts, the square footage of the huts. And in addition, I would make this approval subject to the applicant complying with all laws of the state, federal, and local applicable to the construction, operation, and maintenance of the approved conditional use, including but not limited to water quality. I further make the approval subject to the lift structures, no support towers being built within 50 feet horizontally or vertically of mine shafts or tailings piles, wetlands, and further, that the construction, operation, and maintenance of the approved conditional use shall not result in the violation of any applicable state, federal, or local environmental laws. That's my motion.
I'll second that motion.
We have a motion on the floor. Before we move over the motion, are there any other items, Court, that would need to be included in this motion that we have not been in terms of discussion?
I believe that the Department of Environmental Quality construction permit is contained within the general compliance with laws, rules, and complying with all laws, rules, and regulations that are applicable. You may want to state that separately. You may also want to add a condition that Snowbird provide engineering or studies necessary to show that the towers are not built over mine shafts, which I think would possibly also be part of the Department of Water Quality permit.
You want to amend your motion?
Well, I guess, I think I said that, but I'm happy to say it the way you said it, Court. So the motion would include that no support towers are built within 50 feet horizontally and vertically of the mine shaft or tailings piles or wetlands. And as part of that approval process, they have to get a building permit, which would identify where those support towers are going to be built. So that information, I would assume, must be within that building permit process.
Correct. They'll be required to provide a detailed site plan, and county building official will be reviewing those specifically.
Something more than a sketch with an X.
Yes. So we'll, normally we deal with setback issues and would need to verify a surveyed location of the property line, and the building official, building code would require that.
And to clarify my motion, it is my intent that the compliance with applicable laws, including the federal and state laws, would include the approval of the construction, I don't know what to call that, construction permit, which my understanding is you have to get anyway. So that gives me a lot of comfort that this decision is not a decision that they will not impair the water quality. That's not what I'm making tonight. I think that decision is going to be made through the construction permit process.
Just some discussion on the motion if you can, that's before us. Yeah. So I'm hearing you guys indicate a couple of things with the motion and second. One is you don't think there's any new information we can learn in an extension. It's just going to be rehashing the same stuff, and I understand that. But secondarily, you think the assurance for water quality is going to be validated because the Division of Water Quality, the state division, is going to have to weigh in on the plan before the construction can occur. Is that correct? And is that a correct assumption?
In addition, yes, in addition to that, I believe the conditions that were adopted that staff recommended also included the proposed water monitoring draft proposal that has a water monitoring process during the duration of the construction process and beyond. I believe it maybe up to 10 years. Division of Water Quality indicated they would utilize those samples as part of their data gathering.
I think that's paragraph 12 of the approval.
What about anything, what about a condition to state something about responsible public use from the AF side, summertime use, anything that you think we need to clarify there? I mean, they've told us tonight they're going to allow hiking and camping and biking on the private property. Do you think, can we include that as a condition, or should we just
It is
take the dialogue that's before us?
It is included as one of the conditions referenced that meets all applicable sections of the ordinance, specifically I think it's 3-47, which requires any approval of the facilities part of the application tonight can only be accessed through the existing resort. So this is not authorizing any access for use of these facilities through American Fork Canyon. That's part of the ordinance.
Yeah, and that was what I was driving at. What I was driving at was just sort of the recreational, non-snowbird use of the property. And whether or not, I've heard Snowbird tell us tonight that they don't have a problem with people hiking and some of the responsible activities in the summer. I mean, the safety things in the winter aren't an issue, and we understand that. But is there any, I'm turning to you,
Well,
is there anything in the motion, any condition that would sort of put some folks at ease in that regard?
Well, I think the only roads that we contemplated were the Class D public
Correct.
roads, and that you could put a condition that those roads will be subject to all applicable local, federal, and state regulations for access.
Which was my intent with the all-inclusive applicable laws and rules. I don't feel like we have the jurisdiction to tell somebody what's a public road and what's not a public road.
True.
But I agree with you that I don't think that Snowbird should be shutting off established public roads. And if there are prescriptive easements that are established at some point in the proper way, then obviously they couldn't cut those off either.
What I'm talking about is the guy that goes to the end of the public road, parks his car, and goes for a hike. I've heard Snowbird say tonight that they're not inclined to cut that off. Is that enough, or do we want to make that a condition?
Well, I'm not comfortable telling Snowbird you have to let people hike on your property.
Okay.
I mean, I just don't think that's where we should be. Hopefully they're a good neighbor. Hopefully there are activities on the current resort where I have hiked without telling them. Will continue.
Did you include in there, was there a condition in terms of cell phone coverage?
No,
Did you want to include that in your motion?
I don't, because I don't want to see any more towers up there necessarily. I don't want to require them to put another tower in.
I think what they said they would do it on existing.
They co-locate an antenna on a, I think on a, perhaps on a lift.
My other concern with that is the one gentleman mentioned the construction costs. I don't know what it would take to put cell phone receivers on a tower. You know, if it involves more equipment, more excavation, or put it on a ski tower. Maybe you can comment on that, Marty. It'd be great to have cell phone use up there, but I'm not interested in creating any more impact on that area than what's going to happen already.
We appreciate both concerns, and indeed we think that a co-located antenna on one of the proposed towers would be the easiest way to do that, and that wouldn't be any incremental impact at all. And we'd be willing to do that and happy to have that as an express condition in the approval.
So I would amend my motion to include a co-located cell phone facility on one of the towers.
Did you?
I would state it, I don't know, we can't really force a wireless company to come in and put an antenna up, but that Snowbird would allow cell phone companies to co-locate on their.
So to clarify my motion, a condition of the approval is that Snowbird would allow cell phone service company to use one of their towers to place their facility or receiver on it.
From the staff's perspective, I may see a little challenge in the enforcement of that. I think we really try and tie conditions to those that are somewhat measurable and that we can define and enforce. And so, you know, if you want to go down that road, you know, we may want to have something that would show that there is in place an antenna that provides the coverage in a specific area that you're concerned with, maybe prior to you know, a final occupancy permit for the facility, you know, the lift structure or something in that nature, something that we can really tie it to.
I think because of the added complexity that brings to this, I would withdraw that part of the motion. I don't see how you can force them to allow.
I guess one thing I would mention is that there's nothing in the ordinance that would prevent them from doing that. The ordinance contemplates that ability, and so.
So I would remove that amendment regarding the cell tower.
You want to clarify what your motion is again? My continued concern, my continued concern is just the kind of disconnect still. I mean, I can see the, and that's where I'm at with this is, you know, what can we accomplish with more time discussing between American Fork and Snowbird. That's my hold up. Kind of generally, I like people to be able to meet at middle ground and to work together.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I just don't think this is the last bite of the apple. And we've got building permit process, we've got the construction permit process to go through, which American Fork City can be part of. And I think that's going to be a huge hurdle. So that's why I'm comfortable with it. We can proceed. I'm comfortable moving forward.
So I guess one question, I just want a yes or no. Does American Fork and Snowbird feel that you can come to an agreement?
We'll commit to make ourselves available on a good faith basis starting tomorrow morning and working forward to see if we can accommodate any suggestions that they might have to the sampling and analysis monitoring plan that we proposed. We're a little concerned that that might not reach ultimate fruition within the next 30 days, and irrespective of, we'll commit to work with them in fine-tuning that plan to the extent we think it can be done in a reasonable way. But we would ask the board to issue the permit and rely on our willingness and good faith commitment to work with them and see if we can make some headway that we haven't been able to make thus far. But we would not want any additional time. We're, based on the last month, we're not optimistic that that success can be reached in terms of finding a happy middle point, and we feel like the plan that we've implemented already is responsible, and it's the form used by the division. If you'd like, we'd be happy to pass that proposed plan by the Division of Water Quality and give them an opportunity to make some suggestions and make that a condition to move forward, because we want to do it right, but we don't have confidence that we'll be able to reach a resolution with American Fork City.
Okay, thank you. Director Ford?
I guess we need to respond. We're always willing to work in good faith. As I've said before, we want to work this out. We want to just make sure our residents are taken care of. But the only problem is if we proceed as Snowbird has just requested, that isn't a negotiation, because then they hold all the cards. They can say, we'll do what we want. We appreciate you showing up. And I don't doubt that they would show up and they'd negotiate, but there is no leverage. And so I think the proposal is if we have more time and we can discuss with them, then everybody is forced to work in good faith.
Thank you.
Again, does the Division of Utah Water Quality get a weigh in on this before they disturb the ground?
Yes. Well, I think they laughed, but I do believe what that construction permit they're referring to is a stormwater, it's typical of a construction project. It should have a stormwater management plan is implemented, and I think our Public Works Department can kind of comment on those in general. I think that's the reference of the level of their involvement at that point. In addition, this water is currently under a routine testing cycle just by the nature of their division. So we have that in place. We have the proposed supplemental testing that the applicant has proposed in addition to that construction permit that's referred to.
If I may, Mr. Roberts, a couple points. I'd ask that we let Nestor, our city engineer, he's one of the best qualified water experts that we've been able to find.
That's the point. We're not going to talk about water quality.
No, I'm talking about the process with the division. So you had one side that was paid by Snowbird to be able to give testimony about the process. We're asking you to allow our side to be able to give that same testimony. I think that when you listen to the attorney talk about the leverage, if you feel that the building permit process allows us to have input, you're wrong. Because all they have to do is go and say, we met the requirements, you have to, by law, issue us a building permit. We, at that point, have no more leverage. And so that's my concern about putting it onto the building permit process, and I think that's what our attorney Casey was trying to get across, but Nestor has better information about that construction permitting process.
We don't need to talk about that, so.
If I may, believe me, I am terrified to be here. But I need to explain the difference between the stormwater permit and the Division of Water Quality permit. They are two different permits. Well,
You shouldn't be ready to make a decision yet.
Mr. Chairman, I believe public comment is closed. So I have a motion before the board. It is up to the board. We have a second to that motion.
You want to elaborate those?
So I'll make the motion again. I would move that we approve the conditional use permit as per the staff's findings under section 4, including paragraphs 1 through 12, and in addition, that the conditions of the approval be subject to full compliance with all the laws of the state, federal, and local municipalities, including compliance with applicable water standards, that no support towers are built within 50 feet horizontally or vertically of any mine shaft or tailing piles, wetlands, and that the construction, operation, maintenance of the approved conditional use shall not result in the violation of any applicable state, federal, local environmental laws, rules, and regulations.
Is there a second?
I second that.
So there's a motion on the floor, moved and seconded. Ready to make a vote?
I'm glad to abstain.
Okay, we'll call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Thank you.
That was 2 and 2. The concern that I express is more of a discussion between American Fork and Snowbird that needs to continue. And Court, what's the process from here?
That motion failed. We've
That
already
that
made
motion
the
failed,
motion.
yeah.
If
That
it
failed,
fails,
yeah.
if you'd like to make another motion, you're free to.
I'll try one, guys. I'll make a motion that we continue for no more than 60 days, the dialogue with the State Division of Water Quality, American Fork City, and Snowbird, and come back in 60 days and just talk water. That's it. The rest of the stuff's off the table for me.
Would you mind amending that motion to include or limit the time for that water discussion?
In here, I would hope they'd come back with smiles on their face and say, here you go. I don't know how we can limit how long that dialogue will take. I mean, that seems hard to me. I think if we just limit it to water, that's it. That's why I wanted to make that clear. It's a water discussion only.
You are a public servant. You need to listen to us.
It's not an aesthetics
Yeah,
issue
as
again.
long as it
I've
needs
been here
to.
since 5:15.
This is a 1,000-year decision.
I'll clear this room, those who don't, let's keep
I'm making
civil.
a motion, please don't interrupt me. This is a motion that's on the table, and I'm just saying that in 60 days, I think the discussion for me is water. That's my motion. And in 60 days, I don't think, I want to open the discussion to everything else that we've discussed, because I'm okay with the rest of the stuff, but I still wonder about water. And so my motion would be to come back in 60 days, see if we could get a relationship between Snowbird and American Fork and get those water quality questions resolved, and just come back and have that water discussion.
Is there a second to this motion or an alternative motion?
Well, I'll second it.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor to continue this meeting in a couple procedural things. We wanted a date certain, which would
The
be
March
our
meeting.
April meeting.
Josh set that date. And just as a matter of emphasis, this matter is not a public hearing. It has not been. So it'd be nice to clarify that there will be no more public comment submitted to the office or to the board through the staff, and that the issue be limited to as what was specified.
Correct.
And maybe clarify it to the degree, are we talking about a water monitoring plan? Is that specific or,
Yeah,
we appreciate some specificity.
Yeah, I think a water monitoring plan that's acceptable to both parties, or
Both parties,
best we can do.
the applicant and American Fork City.
Correct. And I did say no more than 60 days. If they can do it in 30, put them on the agenda in 30 days.
I think it's more appropriate with the people here that we do it at a date certain.
Okay.
Can I just make a suggestion on, just so it's fair, that we, if we're gonna submit paperwork, that we get it to each other and have a date certain for that as well, so you guys aren't surprised, we're not surprised, so that we can say 10 days before the hearing.
I don't think I can dictate a schedule to you. I've heard you folks say you're both willing parties, and I think you want to get to the same point as quickly as possible, so I'm just saying, the ball's in your court. I'm not gonna give you a schedule and say on day one do this and on day two do that. It's just, we want it resolved. We want you to bring it back here in 60 days resolved.
Okay, and we would like it to do, not just the water monitoring, the water quality, that's what we're talking about here.
Well, water quality is through water monitoring.
But then can we say water quality?
That was the motion.
I
Monitoring was
think
the
it's a
motion.
water monitoring plan
You guys can
to
discuss
assure
that.
water quality. It's a water monitoring plan.
I guess for clarification, the only information that we will forward to the board once we receive it from either party would be related to that issue.
That's correct.
That's correct.
That's my motion.
There's a motion on the floor, it's been seconded.
Are you still okay with the second? Did you get everything? The other discussion still work on the second? You made the second. I mean, the other.
Water quality plan.
Water quality
discussion, you're still
plan,
good?
water
No.
monitoring,
Water
water quality.
Quality.
Water monitoring plan.
So it's water
Clerk,
monitoring plan.
could we clarify the motion so we understand?
Okay, so
Are
you make the
we
motion
merely
again.
monitoring, or are we going to test quality?
We're asking for a water monitoring plan that will assure water quality. Okay?
And you've seconded that motion, is that correct?
I second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So the motion 4-0 passes, and so the item will be continued in 2 months with, in terms of the water monitoring plan in place. Thank you for coming to this item. At this point, yes, just 1 second here. We will probably, we need to also make a motion to continue 1553, because that's directly tied to 1552. Is there someone
Move to
like?
continue 1553
Is there a second to that?
To April 7th.
To April 7th.
to the same date, yes.
Second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 4-0. So at this point, we're going to take a short recess, 3 minutes, before we change to the other 2 items that are on the agenda. So appreciate your being here today, your comments, and we'll continue this.